Hi guys, I'm the Mist here, and I'm back with another part of my series on how to make clothing in Blender 2.83. So today we're going to go over how to finish up the mesh, a little bit of tweaking and some shaping, and then setting up the mesh for preparations for unwrapping, and then finally the UV unwrapping. Most of this video is pre-recorded, so I do kind of go through the whole process in fast forward, but I do explain to you what is going on during the process. Now comes the time for me to refine the model by adding some definition. Here I have added some creases where I wanted seams to show. But looking back at this, I think now it might have been smarter to leave this part till almost last. Then I added some edge loops around the neckline, the bottom of the dress skirt, and in areas that needed the spacing of loops improved. In the last video, I didn't finish the sleeves, so I also finished the sleeves by fixing the rotation of my edge loops. When I began them, I just dragged them out from the arm opening and they were not rotated right. This also meant that I needed to make use of the sculpting tools to adjust the fit as I was working. So you might notice I go back and forth between edit and sculpt mode as I work on these. I also smoothed out some of the vortexes so that they would be closer to the same level all the way around the dress. This is important because if I use any pattern on the fabric, for the UV unwrapping needs to be even so it's easier to texture and retexture. There is an added level of difficulty with making clothing for women, the breasts. When modeling around the breasts, we need to keep in mind that they need room for sizing. So more polygons are needed in this area for scaling. I probably could have done a better job on this part, but I need more practice, I guess. But I'm getting better. I also decided to add a flared trim to the sleeves. I was thinking this would be nice for a sheer or lace fabric. Let's not forget shape. There are a couple of ways that you can develop the draping for fabric in Blender. One would be to use the cloth simulation. Now, I have done that before when making drapes or curtains, but I'm not that great at it. Maybe you might even say that I'm a bit old school in the artistic way. I still prefer to do things by hand. I like doing things like the painter who dabs a little paint on and then turns their head and looks at it in different angles and then smooths it and dabs a little more paint on. The method you use will be the one that fits your style of creativity best. When you're building what you like and it's not for a client, the method that you use doesn't really matter that much. It's what makes you happy at that point. Once I finished making the ends of the sleeves, I used the sculpt tools to build that draped appearance. I needed to do this with the sleeves and with the skirt of the dress. Remember when I said I should have modeled and maybe left the seams until closer to the end? I think was where I was adjusting the skirt for the drape here. You can see why I was thinking that and thinking that I should have waited. I managed to keep the edge loops together, but it would have been much easier if I didn't have those to worry about just yet. The dress is done, and I could have gone straight to setting up the mesh for UV unwrapping, but I decided to make my accessories first instead. Just like before, you can see me starting with the plane, merging the points, and building the mesh with the snap to faces turned on. I created both the neck scarf and the belt in this way. Making the neck scarf was the same as adding the shoulders to the dress, so I have fast forwarded through most of this portion of the video. There is only a few differences in that I had to lift the ends of the scarf up so that I could make the part that went underneath. Maybe I should have started from the other end, but it worked out. You may have noticed that most of my parts are still only one-sided when it comes to faces. This is a reason there is a reason I have not included a back facing yet. This mostly has to do with the weighting process and a little bit with the texturing process. And when I get to the video on weight painting, you will see more of why this is important. Here you can see that I am also using the same method to begin to build the dress belt. The only difference here is that I didn't fill in anything with the faces. I simply created the wireframe first. When I did finally select everything and hit F to fill in the faces, it also filled in the portion on the top, around the top of the belt and around the bottom of the belt where the body goes. So I had to go in and remove those faces because they were not needed. I shaped the belt and positioned it correctly. You can see that I added some details, but with this model, I didn't go into a great amount of details. Medieval belts are usually tied in a very specific way, and this belt is reminiscent of one of those belts. But I didn't add the extra parts to simulate the loop tie of the belt. I could have done so, but I decided to just leave it out. Most people don't even notice that part is missing. Instead, I just added the ring for the belt. You might also notice that this is the only part of the entire outfit that I will use solidify on and give a back facing to. And I'll explain this when I get to the rigging and the texturing part of the video. The ring for the belt, I used a different method to create this part because it does not need to conform to the body shape. We don't need snapping turned on. Also, I did not start with a plane because I want this to be perfectly round, so I started with just a simple circle and I extruded out from it and created the ring. This part will also be solidified, and once completed it will be joined to the belt. You might notice that I am also using colors applied to the different parts of the mesh. You can also use these colors, this color coding, to sort your materials as a material ID. This is very useful for Substance Painter if you choose to make use of this feature, or if you want to put all of your materials on a single diffuse texture. But remember, in doing so, that you will need or want to have nothing overlapping. Preparing the model for unwrapping is simple because I've been building with the unwrap in the back of my mind. I will mark all of the seams that separate the adjoining parts, the front from the back and the sleeves, the trim, the sleeve trim, and the front and back of the belt and the belt ring. The neck scarf is the only part that I don't really need any marked seams on because it's only one piece and it doesn't have the back facing yet. Not having a back facing also had the advantage of not having to mark the seams for the back facing, which meant like all of the edges that separated the back facing from the front facing. You might be saying to yourself, but won't that cause overlapping when you do solidify the mesh? Well, the answer to that is yes, but not until after I have exported the mesh for texturing in Substance Painter. And if you don't have Substance Painter, you can create and bake all of your textures right in Blender, by the way. But doing this, it's not until after those textures are prepared do I end up doing the solidify. Then your inside and outside end up sharing the same texture space, but also the same texture. So I've skipped the whole part where it would have caused or cast shadows on the front facing because of some way that the back facing bleeds through. So I don't have that problem, and this is one part of the reason why I don't do the back facing or the solidify right away. When I unwrap the UVs for the dress, I left the one facing on a rotation, but later I had to come back and rotate this back to an upright normal rotation or position because the rotation did not work well in Substance Painter for adding pattern fabric materials. This is something to keep in mind for the ease of texturing or retexturing depending on your workflow. When you are placing UV islands on the map, think about this, the direction the pattern will take on the clothing, and rotate according to a single directional pattern. Even if you don't want to use one now, you might later decide you want to use one. It's better if your UV maps are already prepared and set up for that, so that you don't have to go back and re-upload mesh to Second Life a second time. And that is definitely something you would have to do if you change the UV mapping, because then it won't match. Don't forget to set up your textures or materials in the Material Property Editor tab. Give each part of your mesh a material zone and name. These will be used in Substance Painter. And even if you are not using Substance, naming parts will help you keep your work organized. Again, I can see here that you can see here that I assigned the colors to each material. When I unwrapped the scarf, I tried to get the UVs to lay flat with the relax feature in the UV editor window, but it didn't quite do anything much other than smooth it. I wanted it to be more flat, like the appearance of a scarf that was laid out. But the space that I needed for those UVs would not have been enough. So I had to settle for keeping the curved look that it has at this point. That's all I have for this video. If you are ready for the rigging and texturing, Don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell so that you get all the notifications when videos are added and you won't miss a thing. Until next time, bye for now.